I'm 82 now, and after all these years of listening to people's stories, I can tell you some regrets don't arrive loudly. They settle in quietly and stay there for the rest of your life. This story came from a man who wrote to me late one night. He didn't want advice. He just said, please let someone hear this before I'm gone. His name was Daniel, and what he shared wasn't about one big mistake, but about spending an entire life trying to fix the wrong one. Daniel was 74 when he wrote that letter. He began with a line that felt almost harmless. I thought I was doing the right thing. Back in his early 30s, his life was steady. A small house, a reliable job, a wife named Claire, and a young son who used to wait by the door every evening just to hear his father come home. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was a good one, the kind most people don't realize they'll miss until it's gone. Still, Daniel felt something pulling at him, a quiet restlessness he couldn't explain. He believed there was more out there, something bigger, something worth chasing. And when an opportunity came, a business idea from a friend, he took it. Claire didn't argue. She only asked one question: will it take you away from us? Daniel smiled and said just for a while. He believed that. That was the beginning. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Longer hours, yes. Missed dinners sometimes. A few late nights that turned into many. But Daniel kept telling himself the same thing. This is temporary. It'll all be worth it. His son still waited by the door, just not as long. Then one evening Daniel came home and the hallway was empty. No small footsteps. No eager voice calling out. It wasn't sudden, just gone. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. But he told himself, I'm doing this for them. And that thought made it easier to keep going. By his 40s, the business had grown. More money, more responsibility, more proof that he had made the right choice. At least that's what it looked like. At home, things had changed. Claire stopped asking when he'd be back. Their conversations became shorter, more careful. They didn't argue. And sometimes that's worse, because silence doesn't mean peace. It means something has already started to fade. There was one moment Daniel said he still thinks about. His son's school play. Nothing big, just a small stage, a few lines, and a room full of parents holding cameras. Daniel had promised he'd be there. This time, he meant it. But that afternoon, a meeting came up. Important, urgent, impossible to miss. He told himself he'd make it up later. When he got home, the house was quiet. His son was asleep. Claire stood in the kitchen, her back turned. She didn't raise her voice. She just said, he kept looking for you. That was it. No anger, no argument, just that one sentence. And somehow, it stayed with him longer than anything else. Daniel said that was the first time he felt something shift, a small crack, a question he didn't want to answer. What am I actually building? But the next day came, and with it, more work. And like most people, he ignored that feeling, because it's easier to keep going than to stop and face what you might already be losing. The years passed quietly, not in chaos, not in failure, just in distance. His son grew up and stopped asking for him, stopped expecting him. They became polite with each other, like two people who didn't quite know where they stood anymore. Claire stayed, but she changed. She built a life that didn't depend on Daniel being there. She stopped waiting, and Daniel, he mistook that for stability. He thought everything was holding together. But in reality, it had already started to come apart. By his 50s, Daniel had what he always wanted. The business was successful, the money was there, the pressure had eased. This was supposed to be the moment, so he decided to slow down, come home earlier, spend time with his family, fix what he had missed. But life doesn't pause while you're busy. It keeps moving, with or without you. His son had already left for university. Claire had her own routines now, her own way of living. Daniel would come home and sit in a house that no longer felt familiar. He tried to talk more, tried to reconnect, but something felt off, like he had returned to a place that no longer had space for him. I didn't know how to be part of my own family anymore, he wrote. And that realization didn't hit all at once. It settled in slowly, until it couldn't be ignored. The turning point came years later. Not dramatic, not loud, just one quiet evening. Claire sat across from him and said, "I think I've already lived most of my life without you." No anger, just truth. And then she added, "I don't want to spend the rest of it the same way." That was the moment everything became clear, and by then it was already too late. Daniel tried to change. He worked less, reached out more, called his son, sent messages, but relationships don't rebuild just because you're finally ready. They need time, and time was what he had already spent. His son responded, but carefully, not cold, not distant, just guarded, like someone who had learned not to expect too much. Eventually, Claire left. Not suddenly, not angrily, just quietly, like someone closing a door that had been open for too long. Daniel didn't fight it. Deep down, he knew. This hadn't started now. It had started years ago. By the time he retired, Daniel had everything he once chased: time, money, freedom, but no one to share it with. His son had his own life now, a family of his own. They spoke, occasionally. Visits were short, polite. And when Daniel looked at his grandson, he saw something that stayed with him. Not recognition, just curiosity, like the boy was trying to figure out who he was. That's when it really hit him. He hadn't just been absent, he had become a stranger. "I didn't lose everything at once," Daniel wrote. "I lost it slowly, while I was busy thinking I was building something better." And then he said something even harder to ignore. "I kept trying to fix one mistake by repeating it." He believed more work would solve it, that success would make everything right in the end, but it never does. You can't repair distance by creating more of it. When he finally stopped chasing it, there was nothing left waiting for him. That's the part that stays with me. Not failure, not regret, just that quiet realization that he had run out of time to return. At the end of his letter, he wrote one final line: "I wish I had understood that being there was already enough." No explanation, no excuse, just the truth, as he finally saw it. I've shared many stories over the years, but this one stays close, because it doesn't feel rare. It feels familiar. Too many people believe they can come back later, fix things later, be present later. But later has a way of disappearing. And when you finally look up, the people you love have already learned how to live without you. If this story stays with you tonight, even for a moment, then maybe it's done what he hoped. He didn't want sympathy. He just didn't want his life to pass by without meaning something to someone else. Because in the end, it's not the things we failed to achieve that haunt us the most. It's the people we slowly lost while we were too busy believing we still had time.